the best of all. Having returned to England again this summer, I feel it is time for me to restate with assurance that there is one thing that the British do better than any other nation I know on earth. I am referring to their art of queuing. Just to translate so that people who speak little English or some dialect can understand, queuing is the art of standing in a line and waiting patiently, in a civilized fashion, for your turn to come. We are so proud of our capacity to do this. It is so appealing to our sense of fair play that we have been known to join queues without any idea of what is happening at the other end. It is part of our tradition. We may be selfish, mean, and oafish in other ways, but this particular virtue we take for granted. So much so that when I was living years ago in a foreign country, which shall remain nameless, I decided after a shopping spree in town to go 10 minutes early with my little children and wait for the bus at the point where it started empty. I felt sure that I could then get on in comfort. All went according to plan, and I was first there. I tried to arrange the three of us in a neat line just to show that we were queuing. The next person greeted me in a formal but friendly fashion, definitely un-British, and began to be nice to the children. But he irritated me somewhat by not falling in line. Perhaps they do not do it until 5 or 6 have gathered, I thought, and tried to relax. Over the next 10 minutes, a friendly, but in my opinion undisciplined mob gathered. My blood pressure began to rise, as I sensed that foul play could be expected. I only just resisted stepping off the pavement to preach to the crowd. The bus arrived. The mob streamed past me. The seats were all occupied rapidly. The large square area near the concertina doors began to fill. I wasn't going to get in at all. I feverishly wondered if I had enough money left for a taxi. The conductor looked out and saw me, but it seemed to make no impression on him. He put his hand on the button, and the doors tried to slide over the bulging passengers. You can imagine where the whole nation stood in my estimation at that moment. Then I realized he had rattled the doors as a sign for the standing mob to squeeze together. They did so. Friendly faces peered out through the gap. Stretched arms took my bags, then lifted the children in gently and finally hauled me in after them. The crowd parted as best it could, and I was beckoned through. A student in the back seat was poked in the ribs, and a nod was given in my direction. I was guided to his seat, and the younger child placed on my knee, while the elder one was seated happily on someone's shoulders to avoid his being trampled in the forest of legs below. There I was in my rightful place, having reached it by a slightly different code of behavior from my own. Amazingly, I felt very touched by it all. There can be 2 ways of doing things. One may be more efficient, more just, and perhaps the other has more heart, more warmth in it. When one lives in a foreign country, one learns to adapt, and I considered it a great compliment to be told by my host that I was adaptable. Yes, when we are strangers in a foreign country, we try to adapt as much as possible, to understand and not to give offense. However, we must, after looking at things objectively, reserve the right to retain our basic principles. We must not lean over backwards to be accepted as one of the natives. I could never have bound my feet, worn rings to stretch my neck, have eaten my host's enemy, however tastily he was served up to me, claimed my right to 8 husbands, or even have learned to polish my floors until they became highly dangerous skating rinks. We cannot accept everything, and if we feel there is something which we must offer from our own culture, our technology, our medical knowledge, or our ideas on agriculture, and by our way of life, our religion, then we should finally, with love and tact, do so. Here we are in a country foreign to most of us, not really living in that country, but rather in our small introvert Eglon world. To whom and to what we are going to adapt. Whose habits are we going to accept as our pattern? When are we going to be tolerant and adaptable? The language of our school is English, and it is to a large extent through language that culture is transmitted. The worst Eglon product could, if he works hard at it, know how to swear fairly fluently in 6 or 7 languages. He could learn all the combined tricks of several nations. For whom cheating in exams is a national pastime. Must everyone learn to chew gum and blow bubbles noisily, or have their eardrums blasted out of all hope of retaining their sensitivity? I swear to God, is the introductory remark used by one group when they are about to tell a lie. We know they do not mean us to take them seriously, and we love them as they are, but the habit can spread. Yes, the worst Eglon product could collect the bad habits of 43 nations. But the best product would be, dare I say, friendly and trusting like the Americans, with the courtesy of the Japanese, as sober as a Muslim, groomed like an Italian, as good at languages as the Scandinavians, as drilled in arithmetic as the Iranians, and would treat his whole family with the generosity of an Arab, have a little of the deference of the Chinese towards his grandmother, be as quick-minded as an Israeli, but would express himself with the gentle restraint of a Serb Croat. I cannot give the whole list, but this best Eglon product would blend all our virtues, and of course crown the achievement by queuing like the British.